Hi, Dan Tokar here at the Willow Forge in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. And today I'm going to show you how to make one of these, what I think of as a cone tendril. It's sort of a controlled spiral. This particular one, I'll get a little closer here so you can see it. This particular one is approximately 3 inches long. If you can read tape measures, if you can read rulers upside down, and will take about a foot of stock to make. Or I should say about a foot of taper to make, because you also need to have whatever amount of stock you need to tie it into the rest of the piece of work. So to make that tendril, I'm going to start out with some 3/8 inch round stock, and doesn't really matter the exact length, but 18 inches, 2 foot long piece, whatever you need to make the length you need. Yeah, this one's 2 foot long. That'll be more than enough. You need to draw a long taper on this. So I'm going to end up having a taper that's probably a bit more than a foot long by the time I'm done. Okay, so I've put the cut filter on the camera. I have a 25% pass filter that goes on so that you can actually see the hot metal at about the temperature, the color that it's supposed to be. If I don't put that filter on, it looks like I'm working things that are 500 degrees hotter than they really are. I haven't yet come up with a camera that can handle the contrast problems with making a video of red hot metal. I'm sure they're out there, but the bandpass filter is an easy enough fix. It just makes everything else in the room look really dark, except for the piece of bright metal. I'm going to do this taper in stages. I'll get the very tip fairly hot and draw out the first little bit, and then you do overlapping tapers further and further back. It's a way of blending in the taper so you end up having a nice smooth taper that's longer than you can get in one heat. Back and forth, back and forth. I'm not trying to be particularly neat at this point because I have 2 or 3 heats to kind of even things out. I'm just trying to block out the rough tape. There. A start. So, have you been wondering why I haven't been posting more videos, why I've been down to 1 a month? I have been very busy trying to get the work out. Pent-up demand. All of the clients that work here in 2021 are now here in 2022. And also, I've had a lot of distractions, I'll put it that way. There have been enough things to keep me busy. But anyway, I think now I've resolved a lot of these issues, so I hope to be posting videos at a little higher rate, a little faster. Now that we've got that bar thinned out a bit, it should actually heat up faster, and you don't want to burn it up, so you just an overlapping. You work further and further back on the rod and work the whole thing. And you keep it as a square taper until you've got it mostly where you want it. So, I'm going to start the taper a little further back in the rod. Once you got some heat in this thing, it heats up pretty fast. I try not to edit the heating times out because you need to have some idea of how fast or slow this is happening. Some people edit out all of their heating times, so you really don't know how long it takes that rod to get hot. Fire management in a coal forge is one of the skills you need to learn. There, I'm starting back in the full thickness of the rod. And going forward, all right, now I'll work the front part again. I'm not trying to set any records for speed with this, just trying to show you kind of what my normal production speed would be. It's a pace you can keep up all day long. If I tried to show off and do this really fast, I could show you how to do it in about half the time, but then that's not a pace I can maintain, at least not anymore. By the end of a half an hour, I would need to take a little nap. But at this pace, I can work all day long. So from there to there, that's getting close to the foot we need. And going from the square taper to a round taper will make it a little bit longer. So that's about all the further you need to make the square taper. I'm going to work from the tip backwards, doing the last little bit of tapering and rounding. And again, if you overlap your heats as you work backwards, you can correct and make a nice smooth taper all the way back. With these thin sections, particularly what I have now at the tip, the main thing is you don't want to burn or melt the tip off, so it does not take long. Make that little thin section hot enough. Yeah, I'm working the corners. Okay. Again, an overlapping heat to do the next little section and round it out. I'm not going for a needle sharp taper on this because when you get to forming the tendril, the really fine needle sharp points on a taper have a tendency to break off. It's also, if you want something that's survivable as an architectural piece, you want it to have a little bit of strength. If this was a little decorative piece for inside the home, you could be a little more fine with it. But if it's going to live out in the weather, you don't want it to have the potential of being broken off easily. There might be a fat squirrel that decides to climb on it. The squirrels are very fat this year around here. Might be enough to catch it and break it. So I've got it rounded off from there to there, so I'll hit this section next. And also for you people who don't know fire management, it is a good idea to constantly work green coal in, and because of my flue design, I tend to work the green coal in from back close to the opening for the flue and work it forward. That way any smoke that is generated tends to either be burned by the flame coming back over it, or if it does make smoke, it's close enough that it goes up the flue very quickly. If I did it out here, I would tend to have a lot more smoke in the room. It's a little thing, but every little bit of smoke you don't have in your life, the better off you are. Alright, I want to straighten that out. Alright, so one more little square section back there. And I'll have my long taper. The reason you need such a long taper is that you need, it's a little more than 3 times. It's not quite pi, but you do need 3 times the length in the taper for the length of the tendril you're making, because the tendril goes around itself in a spiral. So you do have a little bit of gap. It is more of a helix and a tight coil. But you still need to have maybe a foot of length to make 4 inches of tendril. So if you wanted a really long, big tendril, you might need a couple of feet of taper. Okay, so that's the long taper. And what I'll start doing now is coiling up for the tendril. Does not take long for those little thin parts at the very end to get hot. I know I've said that before, but I have seen so many people work to get their nice taper melt or burn the end off. Alright, so I start just by and then I have to kind of make it so that it goes past itself. So we might need more of a close-up on the anvil to get this. Alright, I'm going to move the camera so you can see that better. Okay, I've moved the camera. And again, I want to offset that and then coil it up. It's kind of a tighter version of what you do when you're making scrolls. But once you've got that offset, and the taper helps make it so that the tendril is tapered. So you can see what we've got going there as a start. What I will do is once I have all of that coiled up, I will correct the tendrils taper by actually forging on the outside of the whole package before I open it up. Okay, so this is a tiny bit awkward for me just because I've got the camera close enough that the camera is kind of in my armpit. No big deal. And I still want that to be out of the way. So every now and then I've got to get the taper out of the way. So it's starting to look kind of like a snail shell. So just like the instructions on the bottle of shampoo say, rinse and repeat. We're not rinsing, but we are repeating. It's pretty much the same operation until you get the whole tendril coiled up. Another couple inches. You could think of it as making little ice cream cones too. Put it back in the fire. Working the coat toward the fire. Adding more green coal. It's It's actually black coal, but it's green, sort of the way wood is green. It's uncooked coal. So if I get a little bend, it coils, starts coiling a little easier. And as I go along, I can also tighten up and correct the coil. You notice how I keep the standing part of the rod fairly in motion, and that's so you don't end up with big flat spots in your coil, because if you're constantly working it from different directions, it won't have obvious flat spots. Okay, one last coiling operation, and then we'll get into correcting and then opening the tendril. And of course, this operation can be scaled up, so to speak, making much longer tendrils just by making a longer beginning taper, having a longer beginning bar, and just working till you get a longer snail shell. Now, need a little more length in the heat. I try to take fairly short heats on these things, because trying to control coiling more than a couple of turns at one time tends to get out of hand. So you'd rather take a little time and do a neater job so you have less cleanup and adjustment time later on. There is such a thing as being in too much of a hurry about some of these things. Alright, so get a little bit of a bend started, and then kind of back it up on itself. Okay, so I'll put my finger there as kind of an indicator. So we've got, I don't know, 2 inches and change of coil. And what I think I'll do is I'll take the filter off and rearrange the camera so that you can see the vise and a couple of other things where the main operation happens. So this part of the operation is kind of correcting the cone shape of the tendril. I tend to move the cone back and forth because you don't want to have one side that's hotter than the other. So even heating. So I'll flip the rod back and forth in the fire to try and keep the heat even. And right there, I'll get the rod for the tendril in line, which makes all the rest of this easier. That tendril, and what it's doing is it's compacting the coil and opening it up a little bit. Okay, and I'm going to do the tip, which needs to be a little bit thinner. Again, I am moving it around because I don't want cold spots in that coil. If your coil is cold, it won't move evenly and you'll end up with a lumpy coil. You wouldn't want to have a lumpy coil. No, you don't want a lumpy coil. So I'm turning this as I go. And I have a nice conic shape. All right, I'm going to put that in the fire and move the camera again. The camera is never in the right place to catch all of this. The camera never seems to be in the right place to catch all of this. So the idea here is that I'm going to grab the end and pull it open a little bit. So I can put the very end of the tendril right there. Get a hold of it, pull it open just a tiny bit. You don't need much. Yes. All right. Because that's the hard part, is getting that first little bit opened. Then I'm going to move the camera again. Okay, having moved the camera again, I have my little thin cutoff thing, and instead of using it to cut off, I'm going to use it to open the tendril a little bit. What I did in the vise was just pull it back enough so that they weren't in contact. But because it is so hard to control the different thicknesses of the tapered rod, what works better is to actually take something like your hot cut and just kind of roll it along and open it as you go. But you did need to put it in a vise to get just enough opening so that the tool can get in there. Now you see how I'm rolling it and tapping it just enough you're not cutting anything, you're simply getting in that groove and opening the groove up. So there is your opened conic tendril. Now if you want to give this some shape, I'm going to move the camera again. If you want to give this some shape while it's still warm, you can hit it over the anvil and do something like that over the horn of the anvil. And of course you can heat it up and pull on it in the vise to open it even further if you want a more open tendril.